¿Qué tal, chicos? Bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Hawani. One Spanish phrase you didn't know you needed, and I'm mainly talking about beginners here, is using the verb haber in the present tense, however, in this particular structure. Hay que plus another verb in its infinitive form, which expresses a general obligation. Now, before we move forward, we all know that the word I on its own means there is or there are. So it's one of the most versatile words, especially if you're a beginner. Por ejemplo, hay mucha gente aquí. Hay mucha gente aquí. There are a lot of people here. Or hay un supermercado en esta zona. Hay un supermercado en esta zona. Is there a supermarket in this area? Or no hay problema. No hay problema, which is another way of saying no problem as we say it in English. Now, looping back to hay que, what does it mean exactly and why is it so important? First of all, you'll notice that with native speakers in general conversation, you'll hear this phrase all the time, so it's really commonly spoken amongst native speakers. Not only that, it's obviously very useful. However, the thing I love most about this phrase is that grammatically speaking, it's also very easy to form as well as a native English speaker. Let me give you an example. Hay que tener cuidado. Hay que tener cuidado. You have to be careful, or one must be careful. So if we break it down grammatically, you'll see we've got hay que, we've then got the verb tener in its infinitive form, so we don't need to conjugate it, and then we've got cuidado. If you're not familiar with the phrase tener cuidado, it basically means to be careful. As you can see, it's very simple, but let's try a few more examples. Hay que lavarse las manos antes de comer. Hay que lavarse las manos antes de comer. So one must wash their hands before they eat, or you have to wash your hands before you eat. Another example, hay que limpiar la casa. Hay que limpiar la casa. One must clean the house, or you have to clean the house. As I said before, very simple. However, where it can get a little bit tricky as a native English speaker is when do I know when to use hay que and when do I use tener que? Because they are similar, but they are very different. Now, the answer is actually very simple. Remember what I said at the start of the video? Hay que is expressing a general obligation. So, for example, if you're not talking about one person in particular, but you're talking about everyone, or you're talking about a certain group of people, then we would use hay que. However, if you're talking about one person in particular or a couple of people in particular, then you would use tener que. So if that still doesn't make sense, let me give you a few examples. If I were to say, for example, you must work hard, or one must work hard, and I'm talking in a general sense, I'm not talking to you specifically, I'm just talking about everyone these days has to work hard, then I would say, hay que trabajar duro. Hay que trabajar duro. However, if I'm talking with you, and I'm talking about you in particular, that you have to work hard, I would say, tienes que trabajar duro. Tienes que trabajar duro. Can you see the difference there? In English, we don't really decipher the difference between these two structures. We just simply say normally, you have to work hard, and that can mean the person you're speaking to, or you could be talking about everyone in general. However, in Spanish, there is actually a way to decipher or distinguish who you're actually speaking about, which is hay que for general obligations, or you can just use tener que or the verb deber to single out the person or the particular people that you're talking about. I hope that makes sense. Let's try another example. If I were to say in English, one must study, or you have to study, but again, I'm talking in general, like everyone needs to do it, then I could say, hay que estudiar. Hay que estudiar. However, if I was having a conversation with you and I was talking about you specifically, saying that you have to study, I would say, tienes que estudiar. Tienes que estudiar. Nice work. So I hope you're starting to understand why this phrase is so important, because in English, we throw around all these general obligations all the time in conversation. For example, hoy en día hay que trabajar mucho. Hoy en día hay que trabajar mucho. Nowadays, one has to work a lot, or nowadays, you have to work a lot. Or, en Australia, hay que tener más hijos. En Australia, hay que tener más hijos. So in Australia, we must have more kids. Great work, everyone. So I hope that helps. You know what to do next. Go out there and start implementing this, or start trying a few examples of your own in your next few conversations you have in Spanish. As always, if you got any value from this video, I would really appreciate it if you'd consider hitting that like button. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. Hasta pronto.